We now move ahead to the second plenary of the day on governance. I would like to invite the panelists on the stage. Our first panelist for today is Srimati Leena Nandan, former Secretary, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of India. She's a retired IAS officer of the 1987 batch UP cadre. During her career spanning more than 37 years, she has acquired expertise in administration and governance, particularly public policy, in the areas of climate change, infrastructure, and sustainable developmental strategies. Our next panelist is Srimati Arti Ahuja, former Secretary, Labour and Employment and G20 EWG Chair. She is an IAS officer of the 1990 batch of Odisha cadre. She had a career spanning more than 30 years. She was secretary in various departments in the state and has been responsible for bringing many system-level reforms which are now recognized as national best practices. The session will be moderated by Ms. Sujata Saunik, Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, and an Harvard Chan Takemi Fellow 2017. She's the 1987 batch IAS, and she's involved in many strategic interests of the state, from financial reforms to health. I hope we have an extremely invigorating session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'm quite mindful of the fact that, half the audience has gone and the remaining are probably eager to leave. And it so happens that my task has been made easier by the fact that we are just three of us. There was one gentleman who was supposed to come. I don't know if he chickened out or what happened to him, but he didn't turn up. So namaskar and good evening. So what I'm going to do, I know both these colleagues very well. I worked with them in the past, both in Delhi when we were all working here in central government. So we used to meet often. Can you hear me? So we used to meet quite often. So I'm very familiar with their work and what they've been doing. So I will go a little fast, ask quick questions, and also be able to sort of ask them more in the time we have left. So to begin with, India 2047. I don't know how many of you are going to be here, but I definitely plan to be here. I want to see India at 2047. And so whatever we are talking about and whatever we plan to do from now until then, let's assume responsibility for that. Let's understand that it's not just a conference, but whatever we are talking about, we are actually going to put it into action. So as we strive for a more climate resilient future, governance obviously plays a very pivotal role in bridging policy aspirations with on-ground execution. This requires synergy between national frameworks, state-level implementation, and community-led adaptation strategy. All three of us have worked at the central level and also at the state level. Maharashtra, as one of the most climate vulnerable states, more than half the state has sometimes double disasters at the same time. It has been at the forefront of implementing resilience measures, from heat action plans and flood risk mitigation to sustainable urban planning. However, challenges persist, and today's discussion aims to explore how governance can enable systemic resilience, mobilize financial and technological resources, and build institutional capacity to address climate risks. Now, I will turn first to my colleague here, Ms. Nandan, Leena Nandan. She's an IAS officer from UP cadre. I think the anchor did give us a small introduction. I would like to focus more on the fact that she's been serving in central government, both as Secretary of the Department of Consumer Affairs, and thereafter she became the Secretary of Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. And she has just very recently stepped down. So I'm going to turn to you, Leena, and ask you, what were some of the things that you were working on in your tenure and where you could achieve results? And what are some of the things you feel still the work is ongoing?
Thank you, Sujata. I think that's a very good leading question because it connects with one of the key aspects of resilience and adaptation, that is extreme heat conditions. And one of the issues that among the many that we were dealing with in the Environment and Forest Ministry. One of them was the India Cooling Action Plan. And that, in fact, directly connects with so much that we heard, particularly in the last session. We heard about how thermal comfort, buildings, retrofitting of buildings and cities, how we have to reimagine the way that we are leading our lives. So all of that is encompassed in the India Cooling Action Plan. And the supply chain resilience, we must understand the importance of the supply chain. Today, when we want to move perishable commodities or vaccines from one corner of the country to another, what we need is a very good and strong supply chain. But how do we ensure it if we are not able to come out with innovations, come out with better scientific adaptation systems? And here the technology and finance play a very important role. So in fact, my colleague here, Rajshri Ray, the economic advisor, she played a very key role in putting together so many facets of the India Cooling Action Plan. And I'm very happy and proud to say that we did. India was the first to have the Cooling Action Plan, which we launched some 5-6 years ago, probably 2018. 2019, and since then it has become almost like a template for many other countries as we are grappling with increasing extreme heat conditions. So a resilient supply chain is something that, and thermal comfort, as I said, energy efficiency in our appliances, and what is most important, bringing in indigenous and what are native techniques of cooling. We seem to have lost them along the way. We seem to have got overpowered by modern refrigeration systems. So how do we bring them back? How do we nurture these old systems, innovate and scale them up? These are aspects which I think are very vital, and I do hope that in a conference like this, these are the solutions that will be discussed and talked about.
Thank you so much, Leena. I now turn to my other colleague, Ms. Arti Ahuja. For those of you who probably don't know, her educational background includes a master's in economics, an LLB, and advanced degrees in public policy from Princeton University and public health from Harvard University. So why I'm mentioning this particularly is that many civil servants today are seeking higher learning by taking advantage of overseas training programs to be better adapted or better placed to take up challenges that we face in governance. And in fact, both of you bring a very unique perspective to today's topic. So I ask you, Arti, given that you were the Labour Secretary and you also chaired the Employment Working Group of the G20, what are your thoughts on climate change increasingly disrupting labour markets, and particularly for the informal workers, as we heard in the earlier panel also? And what governance mechanisms you were working on to strengthen and protect these workers, in fact, all of the community, and the economic resilience that needs to be built in?
Thank you. And am I audible?
No.
Maybe I can borrow.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you. So taking up from the last panel, we've had 16 speakers before us, of which only 2 were women. So glad to be bringing up the rear end this way. Coming to your question, only yesterday I was in Ahmedabad and interacting with women informal workers. And incidentally, we were talking about their occupational health, and incidentally about the impact of climate change. So let me bring one of those women before you, because after all, about whom are we discussing all these policies? It is about her. So this woman, when we're talking climate change, we see a lot of things before our eyes, which it's like the frog in the boiling water. We see that all the time, but we ignore them. So the rich people like us, we manufacture pure air for ourselves, we manufacture cooling for ourselves, we manufacture everything for ourselves, all the while emitting all that in the face of the woman who's selling vegetables or who's working on the construction site. It is one of the most inequitous things that we see and we ignore every day. The informal sector in India, nearly 80% of our workforce is in the informal sector. And it could be anybody. It's the handloom weaver, it's the artisan, it's the person working the fields, it's the person in the construction sector, etc. And amongst them, who gets impacted most? what we heard from Seva as well is the women, right? So what is it that the government is doing for informal workers, and what I was able to do as well, since you asked specifically? We have the DG Labor Welfare. We also have, India is a fairly federal structure. The states have a lot of leeway in taking decisions and implementing. So the Building and Construction Workers Act in India is a very powerful act which enables the state governments to collect cess from construction activities and spend it for the welfare of the construction workers, building and other construction, even the roads and others. So that is something that we streamlined and issued guidelines for. And in India, another thing you will see, which is ubiquitous, which we don't notice, is the labor chalks, where people are standing asking to be picked up. It's not a good sight. So for labor chalks, what kind of provisions, shelter, water, etc., while they are waiting to be picked up, what needs to be done. And then all the states also have unorganized workers boards, which also collect funds for spending on other informal workers. So without taking too much time, let me say all these things exist and they do contribute in a way for the welfare of the informal workers, though not totally.
Thank you so much, Arti. And I'll come back to you in a bit. So turning back to you, Leena, as we all know that the success of climate governance also depends a lot on funding and finding innovative solutions. In the work that you did, what governance models can ensure greater financial access for climate adaptation, both from the public and the private sector? And if you have any success stories to share.
I think the fundamental aspect of climate change is the need to hedge the transition risk. Today we are talking about companies, and these are not in the traditional sense large companies with deep pockets and the ability to access technology. We are talking about small, micro and medium enterprises. We want them to change the source of energy that they are utilizing, to change the production processes that they are engaging in, bring in new equipment. But what about the risk that it entails? What about the disruptions to the supply chain, the quality, the productivity? All of these are affected. We do need very clear understanding about the kind of finance that can be extended through innovative financial instruments, through insurance cover, through a risk matrix that is developed where the allocation of the risks is proportionate. So I think that is an area that we have focused on in a big way, but it is still work in progress. I cannot say that it has led to some very specific concrete achievement, but I do know that the Ministry of Small, Micro and Medium Enterprises is already working on how to develop a model for such enterprises to be able to absorb the impact that climate change demands of them. That is one. The other thing when we talk about funding is the need, when we look at the impact of climate change in terms of water security and how it is going to impact our food security. Therefore, we always are cognizant of the need for agricultural practices to change, better high-producing, high-yielding seeds to come into play. And we have a clear example of, for example, direct seeded rice, or DSR as it is called, because it uses much less water and is much faster in its growth. But there are productivity issues. Again, where are the funding availabilities being tapped? So these are issues that I think are already being embraced by the policymakers, but we need much more private and public sector and financing institutions to come forward and to have a larger dialogue, and not just a dialogue where we can talk till the cows come home. We have to come out with solutions, and solutions which are pragmatic, practicable and implementable.
Thank you so much, Leena, for sharing that perspective. Keeps going on. Try this one. Actually, this is reminding us that we should end the session fast. Basically, it's the call. So, Arti, I'm very curious to know, how did your stint at Harvard and Princeton shape up your work professionally post these stints, and how did you use data to drive public policy that sort of resulted in some decisions being taken at the highest level. So could you share that, please?
I'll need your mic. Yeah, so I think the first thing I learned in both these places is question everything. Don't take any assumptions. Even if it's a Nobel laureate who's saying something, question that. But to question that, you need to study yourself pretty hard. And the second thing is that look at evidence. Evidence is also of different kinds. RCTs are very popular, but then qualitative evidence is also there. So look at evidence. And I would say Labor Ministry that way, and before that even health or WCD, huge databases that throw up a lot of information. In terms of what we are talking about, we have the whole eShram database, which captures 400 occupations, and there are 30 crore people registered on that database. Their whole socio-economic profile, their Aadhars, everything is captured there. And it is being used very productively for giving them training, for giving them pensions, for linking them to ration cards, etc. So that was that use of the database. We also did a mapping of all the social sector schemes, which are DBT linked, Aadhaar based, and only 34 central government schemes, which could qualify as social security, didn't even take the state governments. This we wanted to do for the ILO report on social security that comes out, which showed only 24% coverage in India, which we all know is not a fact. So we did that mapping and we found that nearly 69 crore people are covered under one social security scheme or the other. Leave aside the 80 crore covered by the ration scheme. So just that is the power of looking at data and making decisions. And similarly, on the health side, we have the whole disease surveillance program. I was in COVID during health, and the same thing for informal workers, for others, people who were not able to find work. We were able to pick out the hot spots and then provide them compensation and other kind of things. So I think that use of data is something that got into the mind during these courses.
Thank you so much. So, Leena, I asked you earlier, you during your stint in the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change, particularly on climate change, what are some of the issues you were working on and that work is still continuing in the ministry? I think the audience would like to know that.
One very important development that took place, and we were very happy to highlight it during G20, was the whole thrust on circular economy. So it may not be directly linked with the issue of climate change per se when we talk about the resilience to extreme heat conditions and to water stress and all of that, and the need for us to come out with good models for the health sector, agriculture, water security, labor. So all of those are, of course, very important aspects which will no doubt be deliberated upon in the next couple of days, and hopefully leading to some very good recommendations for guiding policy level decisions, because that should be the ultimate outcome. We should not be sitting here to brainstorm unless it leads to something very concrete in terms of actionable pathways. So to come back to the issue of environment, which was also one of the key aspects of the ministry that I was looking after, circular economy, where we talked about how waste can be transformed into wealth. And we are all cognizant of the fact that plastic, for instance, is something that everywhere is really contributing to environmental degradation. So how, instead of simply putting the onus on municipal bodies to collect it and dispose of it, it actually was put into a different ecosystem of polluter pays. So where the producers, importers and brand owners of products, beginning with plastic, it has gone on to several other categories of products, electronic and e-waste, waste tires, used oil, all of these have come into the ambit. Electronic waste is also one of them. We're all very happy to have computers and mobiles and keep changing them for new products. But what happens to the one that we have thoughtlessly discarded? It ends up in a landfill. It ends up polluting the land, water and air. So all of these need to be addressed through a holistic policy, and that is the circular economy EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Framework. And that I am particularly happy. I got the opportunity to be associated with this initiative of the ministry. So beginning with the first set of rules, which we notified in February 22, a series of these rules and putting the ecosystem in place has happened. And it has really taken a quantum leap in terms of waste management and is getting quoted at international levels. It's being, UNEP talked about it in the last G20 meeting in Brazil last year. So it's a good model for the world, and certainly India is committed to making it a success, taking it to other areas, and ultimately the waste to wealth model is the one which will provide a lasting solution.
Thank you so much. Arti, moving forward, climate resilience is not just about creating infrastructure, but also inclusive governance. So, how can we better incorporate indigenous knowledge, best practices that communities follow, and bring that into our strategy as part of the policy setting that we are doing?
So, I think let me talk about nutrition a bit here. One of the impacts of climate change is on nutrition through the impact on the crops, the access to nutrition when there is drought, even the nutrient change in the crops. So, what happens is that if a person is already malnourished, let's say undernourished, it exacerbates their condition. What you need to make the nutrition more absorbable, etc., is a whole lot of changes in that. And I think that is where one has learned from the communities. Just to give you an example, for example, long time back in 2010, we were, having a paradigm shift in the ICDS. ICDS, for those who don't know, one of the things it does is provide supplementary nutrition to children below 6 years and to pregnant and lactating mothers. Now, for children below 6 years, so when we were discussing with the communities and with the Anganwadi workers, for take-home ration, children below 3 years, they were being given rice and dal, which, as you know, gets consumed within the family. The whole family eats that. What is it that we could give that would be culturally appropriate and would only be given to the child who is less than 3 years old or to the pregnant mother? And we found the answer from within the community itself. This is Orissa in 2010. And when we asked people, when we asked the communities, there is already a tradition of giving something called chatua, which is multiple grains mixed together, which are already given to the children. And lo and behold, that learning led us to then get them manufactured locally through these self-help groups. And that was cited as a best practice by the commissioners of the Supreme Court, one of whom is also sitting here. So, but that came only from learning from the communities.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So, just last thoughts now. Could you please give me in 1 minute, what do you feel India at 2047 should look like? Just your thoughts on what it should look like as a vision to sort of propel us to reach there. So, Leena, starting with you.
I think the physical and social infrastructure that is so important for us, each individual, each society, to achieve our potential. Therefore, not only the roads and highways, but access to clean and affordable electricity, best infrastructure in terms of health and education. And if we are able to provide all of these, there is no stopping India, because this is our time in the sun, and India has shown its leadership. India is, as I believe, a leader who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way. And that is what we will show to the world come 2047.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Arti, your thoughts on what India at 2047 should be?
I can't better that. But what I will say is that in 2047, the child who's in the womb today will be 23.
Yeah.
And that's the person who's going to be leading our country. We'll be the third largest economy. But that child is going to be the one. And, so what is it that we need to do today to prepare that child to lead better? And a lot of things. But I think the first thing is about the way we think. We think of people as silos. We think of that person as informal worker, as this, as mother, as this, or whatever. It's time that we also got our act together. And for all these wicked problems, we started thinking of that individual as the individual and started working our way up instead of the other way around presently. And this is applicable for climate, it's applicable for a lot of other things. So somewhere we also need to figure that out.
Okay. So it's been really, truly a privilege to be on the same panel with my two esteemed colleagues who have done pioneering work in their journeys. And we three are now going to start figuring out life at 60, which is not such a bad idea considering we are focusing on the next 22 years. Meanwhile, as I conclude today's second plenary discussion, I hope that we are a little bit more better informed about what we must strengthen moving forward. How can we have better disaster preparedness? How can we have better multi-level, multi-stakeholder coordination, work together, listen to all voices, provide for climate finance, have more inclusive policies, as my colleague just mentioned, and also look at innovation that can be driven technologically. So do business a little bit differently. And the success of India's climate resilience journey by 2047 will depend on how effectively each one of us in this room, irrespective of our background, works together to integrate all of these things into one common framework for the country to achieve. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention. And it was really, truly a very nice event. Thank you to Lakshmi, Mittal, and family, South Asia Institute, Harvard University, and as well as to all the government partners here. Thank you so much. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Really like to say that it has been a triple I panel. It has been interesting, intriguing, and very insightful. Thank you for drawing our attention to crucial areas that I am sure will be deliberated in depth over the next 2 days. I would now call upon Mr. Hitesh Hathi to give the vote of thanks.
Thank you for that last panel. It was a wonderful way to end the day. I won't take very long. I just want to say in the last panel, we heard a call for how we should be hearing a wide range of voices and maybe paying attention to the balance of voices we hear. And of course, we hear that. Thank you. And, Sachit earlier on mentioned that he was like Ekalavya, in respect to one of the faculty, but I feel like we've all been like Ekalavyas, listening to fields that are not our own, but with a lot to learn. I'm looking forward to the next 3 days of deliberations where we'll have intensive workshops. Look forward to hearing from those of you who are speaking at those and to seeing the rest of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to our partners. And thank you all of you in the audience for your patience and your presence. See you tomorrow.